All right, everybody. Oh, I say everybody. Truth be told, this was we were supposed to record this PPVA webinar, and we didn't. So here, Frank and I are smiling like a bunch of idiots because we've got to act like we're presenting this PPVA webinar again to an audience full of really inquisitively, high-profile advisors all across the U.S., and it's just us. So, Frank, how's your acting skills?
I don't know. We're gonna see. I'm trying to. I think I can play some advisor roles, in our interactions over the next, 30, 45 minutes here.
All right. Well, maybe the upshot of this whole thing is that this might be a little quicker because we don't have the interruption, not the interruptions, but the interruptions of questions, which we actually like. So don't take that bad. Interrupt us next time. But yeah, this might go a little quicker than the actual webinar we did host last week. So anyway, on to PPVA and what it is that we're doing to help people with maximizing their financial and charitable objectives, with the emphasis on charitable, because you know what, we love people helping people make great impacts in the communities in which they live and serve. So you want to talk about this, Frank?
Yep. All right. So our agenda for today is really to talk first. Let's introduce private placement variable annuities and how do they work. We are going to have three different case studies. The first being maximizing charitable impact during lifetime and at death. We're going to talk about 1035 exchanges from existing retail annuities, as well as 1035 exchanges from traditional life insurance policies, which have embedded losses. Ben, you can raise your hand or interrupt me at any time if you have a question.
If only we could remember some of the great questions we got last time. That'd be really helpful, but we can't. I don't even have a transcript, so I don't even think we have those. So
right. And so for those that missed our first PPLI deep dive, that is on our website, and we talked about repurposing existing life insurance for PPLI.
Yeah, so go watch it. It's a really informative discussion on taking existing life insurance and using that for PPLI. All right, so what is a PPVA, a private placement variable annuity? Well, unsurprisingly, it is just like a PPLI, a private placement life insurance contract, only it's a variable annuity. So the tax characteristics are really the key defining feature that are different than PPLI. So just like PPLI, PPVA is institutionally priced. So again, low fees, maximum flexibility. It doesn't pay commissions, so there are no surrender charges. One cool thing about PPVA, you see there on the very first bullet there, it has unlimited contributions. So unlike PPLI, where you've got to schedule out how many premiums you're going to put in, whether it's 4 or 5 premiums and $10 million or whatever that is, you can contribute to your PPVA in any amount at any time. I think the largest PPVA that I'm aware of, at least as of a couple of years ago, was $1.2 billion. A lady on the East Coast is very philanthropically inclined, and she received a lot of money. Her and her husband went, in their working years, they sold businesses, whatever. She dumped a bunch of money into a PPVA, and she gets to defer all the tax on that until her death, in which case the PPVA goes to charity. So again, as much as you want at any time, that's really a cool feature of PPVA. Just like PPLI, though, the fees and expenses are fully disclosed. They're transparent. You can spreadsheet them. You can see exactly what deductions are taking place within the contract at any time and who's getting paid. But really, the key distinction, again, on PPVA versus PPLI is that taxation. So that last bullet there, high net worth families and individuals are using it to defer or eliminate income taxes on a portion of their investment portfolio. Just like PPLI, the only difference, though, is if I go to pull money out, because it's a variable annuity, I'm going to owe ordinary income tax on any of the gains. And because it's a variable annuity, it's also last in, first out in terms of tax treatment. So I can't access my basis or principal amount until I burn through all my gains. So it's a very tax inefficient asset if I'm looking to get money. That's where we use PPLI. But again, for charitable planning and other planning, we'll look at, again, a PPV is a great asset. Second bullet point there, just like PPLI, these investments can be managed by your RIA or investment professional at a bank or other institution. It's going to be in a separately managed account. The funds will be custodied at Schwab, Pershing, Fidelity, things like that. You can also do these IDFs, the insurance dedicated funds. Frank and I were just talking prior to jumping on this re-recording of this deal. There's some really great IDFs, insurance dedicated funds, that offer some great strategies that most, I would say, even affluent and ultra affluent families don't have access to, or don't have access to because of the thresholds in order to get into. So Bain Capital is a great example. Several of their funds have $25 million minimums. You can actually get into some of their funds for as little as $500,000 via an IDF. So again, some great options for people from an investment perspective. So you're not limited to a menu basis list of funds, but you can pick some of them if you want to. Tax treatment, again, I already alluded to this, but you get, as long as the PPVA is in force, you get unlimited deferrals of investment gains until death. There are no K1s, again, because functionally the insurance company is the subscriber to the investment, so you don't get any K1s on any assets that you own inside the PPVA. But again, all withdrawals and earnings are subject to ordinary income tax. The LIFO treatment, we just talked about that. Again, if you go to pull money out, you're going to get ordinary income on all of that, which again may not be a problem if you're buying, say, an ordinary income producing asset. At least you get the benefit of the deferral, right? You can buy that asset and defer for maybe 5, 10, 15 years. Maybe you move states, you move from California to Texas. Now you're able to get that income. Yeah, you're still paying ordinary income, but you're not paying at a 54% tax rate. Now you're paying at a 35 or something like that. So that might be a use case for it. And then again, because it's an annuity, because it's kind of captured under, the ERISA guidelines around, this is meant to be a retirement, funding vehicle. Any withdrawals or distributions prior to age 59 and a half are going to incur another 10% penalty. So last bullet there, just like PPLI, there's no PPVA code. It complies with all relevant tax code sections. There's no carve out. There's no specific way really to think about PPVA. Again, the only real key defining characteristic of a PPVA are the cool assets that you can own inside of it, just like PPLI. So it's a product for high net worth and ultra affluent families to be able to use with their cool investments they're already doing. So anything to add there, Frank?
No, I think you did a great job, man.
Sometimes you just start talking and you have no idea, where am I even, right? All right. So who's the ideal client? And again, we're going to hit a lot on this around the charitable component, not because you can't use it for other charitable or for other reasons other than charity, but it used to be that, prior to the end of 2020, there was a tax code change in Congress that was passed in one of the budget bills that tweaked the way life insurance was able to be funded. So prior to 2020, PPLI, the cost structure of PPLI was actually about twice as expensive as it is today. And so people would use PPVA a lot more generously, or they would use it a lot more prior to 2020 because the cost structure was half of PPLI. Well, now actually PPLI and PPVA are priced not identical, because there still is the cost of insurance in PPLI, but the cost differential isn't quite there. And so when people are looking at deferral of income taxes and potentially accessing the money down the road, it makes sense in almost every case to use PPLI, unless you have an insurability issue or things like that, just because the cost structure isn't that much, there isn't that great of a differential between the cost structure. So yes, you can use it for other use cases. We will talk about that, but really these are the people that, have charitable intent, but they're unwilling to part with assets today for control issues, for like what if scenarios. I might change my mind. Those are your ideal clients for PPVA. Again, the unlimited flexibility, the contributions, you can change your mind. All that plays into all of this. And so again, whether family is going to, end of life, like family foundation, donor advised fund, an alma mater, hospital. Again, you name the charitable, what's the recipient? Those are great use cases for PPVA. And again, you can put multiple beneficiaries on a variable annuity. And then again, these other investments are another great spot to consider PPVA. Anything with high tax assets are great to consider dumping into PPVA.
Right.
Planning applications.
Add there, and Ben,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
apologize if I am repeating something you said, but these beneficiaries are revocable.
That's right.
That the client is still in control. So yes, you could name multiple beneficiaries, a single beneficiary, but that can be changed.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest most of our clients that we put in PPVA are going to have multiple beneficiaries, and likely they'll change them over time. Unless it's like a family foundation, in which case, again, ultimately the beneficiary are a DAF, right? I mean, the ultimate beneficiaries are going to kind of evolve over time, but yeah, I think that's one of the great features is the flexibility of being able to change that. Planning applications, again, we mostly hit this. This is kind of a repeat of the previous slide. Again, tax deferred investing for those highly taxable investments, the fixed income, the private credit, all that. The pre-migration, so like state to state tax deferral, right? You're in California or New York, you're going to go to Texas or Florida. Great place to put those income producing assets, pick up the kind of the arbitrage there. The charitable planning tool, we just talked about that. And then again, the tax efficient grantor trust planning. We can block taxes inside a grantor trust back to the grantor by relocating those assets in PPVA, just like PPLI. So there are some considerations before we get into our first case study. And these are things that, again, are not different. At least the first part here is not different than PPLI. So we have to do cash premiums only. We can't contribute any assets in kind. Offshore promoters will tell you can. And if you looked at any of the recent kind of noise in the PPLI, PPVA space, you notice that they are targeting those in a very real and a very hard way. So we tell people shy away from that. Go with the vanilla PPVA, right down the middle of the fairway kind of deal.
Yep.
So cash premiums only. Investor controls is the same issue there. If you appoint an SMA, a separate account manager, who is your manager on your other assets, you got to be cognizant of the fact that you can't direct trades, you can't direct specific investments inside the SMA. So they have to have full discretionary control over those assets. And again, we exist, they exist, and then the administrator will all exist to make sure we don't accidentally trip that up. But that has to be a consideration. It has to be noted, though, as well, that IDFs are exempt from investor control because the service has already ruled that Bain Capital, since I already used them, they're already investing a certain way. And the fact that you invest in their fund, there's no way you could call them and tell Mr. Bain or whoever that is, hey, I need you to buy this, sell that. He's not going to listen to you, right? So you can actually pick a specific IDF and the specific amount that you want to put in it. And that does not violate investor control. So that's one kind of carve out if you want to think of it that way. And then another consideration, this last one here, is the potential for turning long-term capital gains into ordinary income. And this is, again, would be like if you bought, say an individual stock, right? And you sold it. Normally you'd pay ordinary or you'd pay capital gains if you held it for longer than a year. But if you sold it inside a PPVA, doesn't matter how long you held it, and then you withdrew the money, you're going to pay ordinary income tax on that. So you just want to be cognizant of the types of assets that you're owning in there if you anticipate pulling money out later.
Right. And I think that, right, your last point is absolutely the key point, because if somebody is going into the PPVA knowing 100% that my purpose is charitable, this last point doesn't really matter.
That's right.
And you're really just trying to maximize the value of the contract via the income tax blocking, tool.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's where you take like a venture capital fund that may, 10, 15, 100x. That might be all capital gains, but you don't care because it's going to go to charity, right? So could be a great use case for that too. Flexible benefits. Hey, this is your point, Frank, right? You can change your mind with this thing. This is great. All right. You can leave it to your kids, your grandkids. You can change the charitable bequest. We just talked about that. Split the beneficiaries, deposit funds at any time. Again, this is again, one of the great use cases for PPVA, not use cases, but the way we think about it is just that it's so flexible, right? This is not something you put your clients into and man, it's a boy, they're stuck there for 10 or 15 or 50 years, right? And this is a put money in, change provisions, change beneficiaries, add money later, pull money out, lots of ways in and out. And even that last point, the off ramp, can surrender the contract anytime, get my money back. So again, it's really flexible. And it's a great tool for anybody who's looking for some income tax mitigation. Last 2 points, we're going to get to our first case study here. Where does it break? Just like PPLI, it breaks in 2 cases. If you violate the investor control doctrine or you violate the diversification requirements of the investment portfolio. So again, we exist, you're an investment professional, and the administrator all exists to make sure we don't break these. You really can't break these by accident. I mean, you might call your investment professional and say, hey, buy me some NVIDIA stock. I think that's going to go to the moon. You telling them to do that is not a violation. Only if they act on it is it a violation, and they're going to be educated and be aware of this as well. to make sure that they don't do that. So again, everybody's on the same team here to make sure that we don't create an issue down the road. Any comments, Frank,
Yeah.
before you jump in on the
No,
first case study?
I think one of, when I'm thinking about this, like, what is sort of that foundational principle here? To me, whether it's PPLI or PPVA, depending on what somebody's trying to solve for, right? This is an asset location tool.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, and ultimately, I think we're a pretty numbers oriented firm, right? It becomes an Excel spreadsheet problem. And these are just happen to be incredibly powerful tools when it comes to income taxes.
Yeah. I gave a presentation once, Frank, where somebody said at the end, they go, man, I love your spreadsheets. And I kind of took that as a compliment. I mean, they're not mine. One of the guys in our office, Johnny, is the Excel wizard. He does everything. Yeah, I mean, just on point. So if you like our spreadsheets and our numbers, give Johnny some kudos because he's the man. But that's ultimately how you determine the value of everything, is compare the benefits and the cost of everything. Does it make sense to do it? So as we jump into the first case study, I want to start by saying I posted about this on LinkedIn because I love, PPLI, PPVA, regular insurance for estate tax planning, buy-sell insurance for the business owners, all the stuff that we do. We help really successful people and their advisors be more successful, right? Keep more of what they've earned and worked really hard for. And it's great. I love helping, people, maintain, control of their businesses and their farmland and the ranches and whatever else, all that stuff they've done, right? But said crassly, we help rich people stay rich, right? I think one of the things that Frank and I in particular really love about PPVA is because of that charitable component, we help really rich people be really generous too. And I think that's more important to either one of us. Keeping you rich and getting your grandkids much money. That's fun. I mean, that's what we work hard for, but really making an impact in the people and causes that you really care about really turns my crank. I know it turns Frank's crank as well. So we're excited to show you kind of how a simple tool like a PPVA can really have an outsized return on somebody's impact.
All right. So our first situation is a family we worked with here in Illinois. They sold their family business for $200 million, approximately. They had 5 children. They had done some estate planning, not a lot. And their first priority was, frankly, thinking about their children, their children's children, and really constructing that estate plan to efficiently, transfer assets to the next generation and beyond. They were very multi-generational. They are charitably inclined, but they were really more focused on an end-of-life charitable plan, knowing that would help reduce their estate tax obligation. But, I think it really had to do with them maintaining control for longer periods of time and that flexibility, right? And so through our conversations, right, we laid out what did the family see as their goals and objectives? What were their priorities here? So one was maximize the charitable contribution at death, retain control of funds during their lifetime. They wanted that flexibility, whether it comes to the beneficiary or ultimately the use of the funds, right? They, notwithstanding the fact that $200 million, obviously there was taxes involved, but they had some previous wealth, and actually their balance sheet really turned out to be around $200 million post-taxes. Who knows, right? So that flexibility was really important. And they knew that by donating the PPV at the end of life, they did have the ability to reduce their estate tax liability. The challenges and the issues, I've really spoken them. They're the mirror image of really almost what the goals and objectives were. They were very nervous about irrevocable commitments. They were also, in terms of maybe setting up a foundation, they didn't want to be burdened and having to think about certain distribution regulations. We did spend a lot of time talking about income tax deductions. Obviously, there were other advisors in the room, that is for sure. So it wasn't just myself. Income tax deductions versus estate tax deductions. And ultimately, they felt that, listen, they were going to be making charitable contributions during their lifetime, and they felt more comfortable doing that on an ad hoc basis rather than via foundation or something like that. So in this case, it was an Illinois resident, as I said. They funded the PPVA $20 million. We assumed a growth rate of 8% and an effective tax rate of 34%. So again, we talked about this as an asset location tool. That effective tax rate, we are not just simply using private credit. In the appendix, you will actually see our ledger of our return assumptions, turnover, ordinary income, long-term capital gains. All in all, the effective tax rate was 34%. If we used private credit, I believe in Illinois, we are somewhere between like 46 and 47%.
So you got to be high 40s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I'd say here before we move on to the impact of this is, and again, it's why we talked about PPVA being just so broadly applicable. I'm not sure. I would challenge any advisor that would, it's actually going to listen to this call. It's like, what client doesn't have these goals and objectives, right? I mean, if they're charitably inclined at all, they want to maximize their impact, right? They want to retain control of their funds during their lifetime, maintain flexibility, and reduce estate taxes. I mean, all these things are I would say, very common and very, very similar. And again, I think that's why this fits so well.
So here's our overall result sheet. Again, we assume an 8% gross return. On the far left is the taxable account. As a result of the effective, that 34% tax rate, the actual net return is only 5.28%. PPVA, obviously same gross account. The cost of the structure in this particular example is 41 basis points. So the client is netting out 7.59% for a 231 basis point PPVA advantage. And at life expectancy, which is at age 89, there is almost a $78 million difference in the charitable impact. At age 95, we're looking at more than double.
Yeah, it's a 2Xer, right?
Yep.
And what we'll see here on the ledger page in a minute is it's better from day one, year one. So again, if you have the unfortunate, event of being hit by the proverbial bus or train or whatever it is, your client's always going to be better off, even if it's in the first year.
Yeah. So again, this goes back to when I mentioned the Excel spreadsheet problem. We're just comparing costs here, right? So the taxable account, the cumulative costs are $52 million over 35 years. And the I think we actually have a typo there, Ben.
Come on.
It says taxable account cumulative cost twice.
No, look at that. That's terrible.
Terrible.
Johnny. We're firing Johnny. How did we let this happen?
I'm blaming it on Johnny.
Yeah.
Anyway, that middle column that says taxable account cumulative cost, that's actually the PPVA cumulative cost. And the far right-hand column is showing the cumulative cost, but what it's not showing, although $40 million is certainly a lot of money after 35 years, is it's the compounding effect. Right. That's why we're seeing a 2Xer plus at 95, right?
It's that's what you see here, right?
Compounded.
Yeah. Yeah. So 40 million plus growth is going to give us this 200. Well, not 259, but the difference between those two numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
And here's our ledger. Again, we actually have the tax details of the investments in the appendix. On the left side is your taxable account. We're showing the annual yield, the annual tax, and then the net to charity. On the PPVA side, right, the annual cost, that's the cost of the structure. And so we see over time, it's a little bit less in the first year. There's a small structuring fee that's associated with it.
I was going to point that out. It's the first time I've noticed that too, is that this looks like there's a difference in yield. There really isn't. The 20 million goes in. There's a little bit of fee drag going in that's just unavoidable, and that's the reason for the difference there.
Right. But like Ben said, from year one, there is a PPVA advantage here.
Yeah.
And so for those that are charitably, right, that fit that fact pattern that, Ben, I think, accurately describes, that fit many of our charitably inclined clients, they want to maintain that flexibility. They don't necessarily know, which charity might be they want to have as the beneficiary. This is a really powerful tool to maximize that charitable impact.
I was going to add one thing, Frank. It hit me,
Yeah.
and I'd forgotten this point when we did the call the first time. But when you and we've talked with many entrepreneurs and business owners and wealthy families over the years, there's a real sense of weightiness and the burden of responsibility of giving away this amount of money, right? And for those who they don't have instant wealth, but they're an overnight success story, 20 or 30 years in the making, but they finally have wealth that's liquid that they can give away, right? In real meaningful amounts. Mm-hmm. Well, it behooves them to slow down, right? And say, I don't know where this needs to go. I know I'm going to be charitable, but before I just start doling out 100,000 here, 100,000 there, whatever that may be, let me slow down and think about my priorities, my principles, my values. What am I trying to perpetuate? And so maybe this is I'm going to give it away at death. Maybe this is, I want 10 years of deferral, and I'm going to figure out family governance and family values, and we're going to give it to a DAF or a foundation. And then we're going to start being generous, because I want the time to think about that and percolate and whatever, even if you only did it for 10 years, I was just looking, you'd still end up with another $8 million. So again, it pays to wait, right? And be more thoughtful in your approach to charity, as opposed to just start slinging money at institutions that may not be able to handle the amount of generosity you want to actually give them.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. In our two examples that we show, right, which I think is the next page, we're showing, hey, you're giving it all to charity. The next page, no, you're going to keep it all for yourself. Or that's right. You've totally changed your mind.
Right.
But Ben's point is such a good one of nothing saying in 10 years, you take $5 million and make whatever donation you want, right? You just are contributing more money than you otherwise would had you not used the structure in the first place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really a terrific point, Ben.
Well, it just hit me. I was like, because I was just talking with a family that they knew they were going, and they are generous, but also they had all this money. They're like, I can't give this much money away. Like the people that I used to support, like it would wreck their budgets for me all of a sudden to become a 90% of their budget giver every year, right? That ruins what they're trying to do. So anyway, it was just kind of poignant because of some recent conversations, but don't mean to hijack your point. You can talk about
it's great. So here is our other end of the spectrum, which I was just briefly describing. So in this particular example, what we're showing is taxable account on the left side, PPVA account on the right side, but they have a change in plans. And by a change in plans means they have said, we are not giving the money away to charity. We are taking it back for ourselves. And so that after-tax net to heirs is the owner of the contract saying, I just want all of my money back. Here, we are seeing that, for the first 12 years, the PPVA is at a slight disadvantage, right? Because first of all, we have converted some of what would be long-term capital gains into ordinary income, right? There is some structural drag here, right? And those two combinations prevent the PPVA from, maximizing the family wealth until year 13. And then in year 13, the power of the deferral takes over those two things that I mentioned, which are the structural fees and the taxes. And so even converting, what did I say, that the Illinois tax rates, let's call it 46%. So even that 12% delta between the effective tax rate on the left side and the much higher rate on the right side, you still have an $18 million difference at life expectancy.
Yeah. So no harm, no foul kind of thing, right? I mean, change your mind, doesn't you give other assets to the charity or the DAF or the family foundation and keep this one. Again, it all becomes very flexible and meldable depending on what your circumstances are.
Right. And the reality is if you end up putting in something like private credit, which is throwing off only ordinary income, you're basically a winner. If it's not towards the end of year one, it's certainly in year two.
Within the first couple of years anyway.
Yeah. This page, here's an example. This is the charge page. $20 million annual investment. There will be a tax charge to that. In this particular case, there was a $10,000 structuring fee. Depending on the size of the case, depending on the ease, the facts of the matter, that structuring fee can be different. The M&E charge is a combination of a wealth point fee as well as the majority of it being the insurance company fee. Obviously, we're totaling all those charges in that column, and then the cumulative charges over time.
Yeah, these are the only fees from a program perspective of implementing this. This is the only fees that are assessed kind of on our side of the house, meaning like there's no other like maintenance fees or annual filing fees. I mean, it's just a product. The carrier charges all of these up front, charges the M&E on an ongoing basis. They charge the account on a monthly basis. So these are just annual totals of the monthly fees. And that's it. I mean, that's again, the trade is on 20 million bucks. Think of this as you're not getting to pay this in tax, quote unquote, as opposed to paying the government in a tax in a bigger amount. So that's it.
Yep.
What else, Frank? Did we miss anything on that?
No, I think that's it.
So look, the charitable client's great, right? I'm going to give this to a DAF, family foundation, hospital, alma mater, whatever. I'm absolutely going to improve their outcome if they end up doing that, whether at death or in the middle of their life, right? Hey, 10 years, 15 years in, I'm going to do it then. Great. Here, going to do the same thing, but I changed my mind, leave it to my kids, or maybe they need some more income. Maybe they need to go spend the money. Fine too. Again, as long as we give this enough time to cook, so to speak, it's going to work in their favor in almost any scenario and circumstance. Case study number 2 is going to be pretty simple because we don't have a lot of fancy, ledgers and numbers and everything. Like it's more of a theoretical concept. And really what we're going to look at here is a PPVA can benefit a retail investor by taking, kind of outdated or expensive retail contracts and 1035ing them, moving the money in a tax-free exchange into a PPVA. So some of the problems with retail annuities, and if you're a financial advisor on this call, you know these all too well, but you have limited investment options. Now, some have gotten pretty good over the years, but a lot of times you're still constrained in your investment options. You have poor to average investment performance, depends on who's looking at the allocation. Are they rebalancing? Are they actually making really good moves with the money inside the annuity? There's a lot of products out there with high expenses. So a typical variable annuity having a 3 to 4% annual cost is not uncommon. Now, a lot of times that's paying for a rider. Sometimes it's just paying for the base contract, but maybe the client's outgrown the rider. Maybe they don't need it anymore, right? So they've got this variable annuity with 4% drag going on and limited investment choices. Well, you can take that money, move it to PPVA, and give them a much, much better outcome. The last bullet there, product managed outside current relationship. That, for financial advisors, it's not great having, fox in the hen house, so to speak, right? I mean, the guy who sold the annuity might be quote unquote an insurance guy, but a lot of insurance guys are trying to get into the investment management space because there's a lot of money to be made there. Most of them aren't very good at it. Most of them aren't very good at insurance to begin with. Now they're going to be not very good at investment management. But I mean, do you really want somebody else, having a eye to your client and their balance sheet and all the other stuff they're doing? Again, we think not. So again, the advantages are kind of the exact mirror opposite of this, right? So take all the bad of existing retail annuities and say, let's make it better. So let's give us the institutional pricing. Let's have, our financial advisor geniuses who are, we do a lot of work with all over the US. Let's have you guys manage the investments. You have access to insurance dedicated funds too. So if you want to give your client access to Bain, Millennium, Golub, Apollo, you can do that. You can do lower cost registered funds. Registered funds are just these approved mutual funds you can own inside of life insurance and PPVA. So now you get all the best things of the insurance wrapper, the structure that they've already got with none of those downsides.
And I want to echo one point that you had made much earlier in the presentation. We know several, wealth management firms, right? Bain, you mentioned, have a $25 million minimum. I think Millennium's minimum is either $5 or $10 million, right? But you're able to allocate to these funds that otherwise would not be accessible to those clients in $500,000 chunks.
Yep.
And that's a pretty powerful story to tell.
100%. And it's a differentiator for a lot of our advisors who want a different story to tell, right?
Yep. And so by the way, and one other, just in terms of like the cost of the funds, for example, I think there is an increase even on the PPVA side. It is a little more expensive than your typical brokerage account. But let's say the S&P 500 is going to be like 10 or 11 basis points on the PPVA platform. In the retail side, it wouldn't surprise me if it's 60 or 70 basis points at some companies.
Exactly.
So you're just, even if they want to do the exact same thing with registered funds, this is just a much lower cost structure.
Right. Yeah. So the ideal annuity replacement profile is any retail annuity with greater than $500,000 in account value. And typically, if it's cost basis neutral, you can surrender it and get out of it with no tax, right? But a lot of these are going to have gains. We come across these all the time. They've had some annuities that had some pretty good performances, but what worked then is not working now, right? And so one or multiple policies, so we can combine multiple policies to get there. You can have an annuity with $400,000 and you can 1035 it into a PPVA and then top it up. The minimum threshold is kind of $500,000 with most of the carriers that we work with. So that's kind of why we say that number there. But we're also looking for accumulation focused annuities. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of annuities out there right now in the retail market. I don't know what the percentage is, Frank. We've got somebody in house that might know this better, but there's a lot that are like their income, like their what do they call those? Like guaranteed income.
Yeah, lifetime income riders.
Yeah, like the whole idea is to create lifetime income. Well, those aren't really good because you're paying for a rider that a PPVA can't provide. So if this is actually an income focused annuity that your clients have, still reach out to us. We've got a dedicated team internally at WealthPoint that are doing, retail to retail exchange analysis. We're doing a lot of business in that market right now because the interest rates have popped up so high. Basically, being able to improve client outcomes by about 2x in terms of those income riders that we're seeing out there right now. So if you have an income-based rider on an annuity, let's look at an exchange for a better one. Let's not look at moving that to PPVA. But then all annuity types in terms of their base contract, the variables, the fixed, the indexed, the deferred, all that fun stuff. And then we can issue all the way out to age 85. So there's a broad market for this. We're doing one right now for a client I think they're out of Kansas, a couple of annuities. It's going to go to charity. They've got a bunch of gain. And the investment advisor functionally just wants to manage the money and provide a better outcome for the client. So we're just moving it over and letting them manage it. So pretty simple 2 to 3 week process to get these things open. Anything to add, Frank?
Yeah, no, I think that PPVA is just if you're looking for accumulation, this is going to be the best annuity out there. And, someone who's in a retail annuity, they should at least be on their radar. And then just echoing your sentiments of our annuity team, our retail annuity team is terrific.
Yeah.
Those interactions with the clients of wealth managers, it's always a great value add. In a lot of cases, it results in AUM to those wealth managers, and they do a terrific job.
Yeah, we exist to make you guys look good.
Yep.
So don't sleep on the annuities that your clients bring in. We know they're a headache, but let our team rather deal with all that, and we'll help you look good for the client. So, Frank, I just realized we were supposed to tag team that. Now I was going to do this one, so I'm going to let you do this whole case study all by yourself.
Oh,
I'm kidding. We can still tag team it.
I like that.
Okay. All right. All right. So last one is first one, pure charitable intent. Second one is, man, let's talk about, people out there that have the retail annuities and what do we do with them? This one's really interesting. And some people have heard of this, some people haven't, but it's cost basis recovery from a traditional life insurance policy where there's an embedded loss. And by that, we mean the premiums paid exceed the current cash value. There can be a lot of reasons for that. Policy could have performed very poorly. Clients could have missed premiums that have caused the policy to perform. We're not assigning blame. We just know we come across these a lot.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in some cases, unfortunately, in other cases, it's just I guess maybe the nature of the product, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there are reasons why policies don't perform well, not necessarily because it's a bad policy. Could be managed poorly, or again, maybe not maintained with the right level of premiums. Lots of reasons. But thing is, clients in a bad position, and how can we make a bad position or a bad situation? How can we make it better? So you want to launch in here, Frank?
Yeah. So how does the cost basis recovery work? So the 1035, if you have a life insurance policy, when you 1035 it into the annuity contract, there will be a carryover in cost basis. It's got to be the same owner and the same insured / annuitant, right? So it can't, right? We can't have a different ownership structure. That's very important here. Right? We can transfer into any type of annuity from the life insurance. The 1035 can result in the reduction or elimination of income taxes on future gains. So we're going to go over how this actually works, but this is the only way that we are going to be able to capture that loss inside the life insurance policy. Ben and I have both done recent examples of that.
Yeah.
In my example, the client put in a lot of money that it was completely mismanaged, and the funds simply weren't invested. By the time the client had realized the mistake 5.5 years later, he had lost over 40% of his cash value. And so the question was, what do we do? Right? And moving via the 1035 from the life insurance into the annuity was a way to capture that loss for him. Plus, this strategy can be enhanced when the client has the ability to provide additional funds into the annuity contract, which, as Ben mentioned before, annuity PPVAs have unlimited contributions. Go ahead.
So,
why don't you go ahead with this fact pattern?
Yeah. So I was going to say, keep in mind, you can 1035 from life to annuity, but not the other way.
Yep.
Because life has a better tax benefit than annuities. The IRS will let you go to a worse tax environment, right? And the key here is, right here, if you look at this example, I'll explain it here. The client's 63. She's got $8.5 million policy, the $1 million of basis, and $192,000 of surrender value. Well, she's put in $1 million. She's got 192. If she walks away right now, right, she's got 800 grand that she's just going to lose. And you can't write that off. That's not an investment loss. You can't write that off of gains. You can't write that off of passive or active or any of that stuff. It's just vaporized, right? It goes away. Well, that's not a good outcome. She's 63. She can't sell her policy and, get her $1 million back that way either. She's too young. If she was 83, we might be able to sell it for $1 million and get her money back, but she's too young. So she's kind of stuck. And for whatever reason, we did all the other analysis too first to see, should we keep it, reduce the face amount, add some premium, all that. And ultimately she just decided she wanted to get out of this thing. So if I 1035 exchange the cash value into an annuity, I get that 192 over into an annuity, but that 192 annuity, the annuity's value is $192,000, but the basis is $1 million. Now we just learned that tax treatment on PPVAs is last in, first out, but if you don't have any gain, there's no tax treatment at all, right? So I basically have the ability to take that 192, grow it to $1 million, and then cash out the annuity completely tax-free. So that's what this is down here saying is, let's basically grow that 192 to $1 million, surrender the policy, and then I've basically saved my client $323,000 in income taxes, as opposed to her just walking away from the contract. Now, as you might be sitting here saying is, wait a second, $192,000 growing, all the way to $1 million, that's going to take a while. This is a 6%, illustrated return. that's going to take 29 years. 63-year-old woman. I mean, she's more likely to die by then, right? Than to get out of this thing. So this is where Frank said, this is the beautiful thing about PPVA. Again, one, the unlimited investment selection that you got, but then two, you can add money anytime. So here, let's take this 192 with the basis of $1 million. Let's add 2 million to it. So now our basis is 3, but now we've got 2.2 million trying to catch up that $800,000 of basis as opposed to 192 catching up to 800. So you can see here by the 6th year on a projected basis, we catch up, cash value and the policy equal with her basis. At that point, we go to her and say, look, basis equals account value, surrender this thing, walk away. She gets to cash this thing in for 3.109, so forth, so forth. And she gets to walk away, not pay any tax.
Yep.
What
Well,
else
there could be a reason she wants to continue it, right? Maybe her plans have changed, but this is, in terms of maximizing this strategy, this is now maximizing that $323,000 of real savings.
That's right. And we had a question in our real webinar last week. Someone said, hey, what about smaller policies? Do the fees and everything eat up smaller policies? Are not worth doing? And the reality is, again, we already looked at the fees. They're very low. There's not a lot to a PPVA that you can see, like fees would not make this valuable. And again, here, I would argue there's not a whole lot of value below $192,000 that anyone's willing to go do all the work for this, right? So this is, I would say, a low end example. This isn't some, big high end example. This is like a middle of the line. We're helping a client catch up 800 grand in losses, and we're willing to spend the time to do that if it's worth it to the advisor and the client. This works on the big side too. You've got somebody who's got some big premium finance policy that's underwater. Lots of different ways we'd have to extinguish the loan first, but we can move the money to PPVA and catch up some of their losses there too. So again, kind of an under the radar use case for PPVA, under the radar strategy for a lot of folks. We talked to a lot of financial professionals who just don't know anything about this, but it's a win. It's a win when there's a loss, I should say, because we're not making the client whole, but we're helping out in a pretty big way, improve their situation.
Yeah.
What else, Frank?
No, you did a great job, Ben.
But listen, I like tag teaming that one way better, actually. So
all right. So we do have our next deep dive.
Wait, you have to open it up for Q&A. If anyone's actually
I felt like you did an amazing job, and I don't have any questions for you.
Email us if you have questions. Call us. We're available.
Yeah. So we have our deep dive on April 23rd, which is going to be talking about investment options for PPLI and PPVA, and really like what are the differences between the approach using an SMA, which is the approved manager, versus the IDFs and the VITs, which are the funds and the on the platforms at the insurance companies. But before that, Ben, what do you have on the regulatory environment? I've heard some things. The Senate Finance Committee had been working, been talking about PPLI a little bit over the last few weeks. And we saw in the 2025 Green Book, PPLI was mentioned.
Yeah, so we're going to host a policy / regulatory / legislative update. I don't know what we're going to call it. We got to think of some catchy title to call it something, but we're going to host a policy expert and say, hey, what's going on Capitol Hill? These are great structures. We're not taking advantage of any laws. Our clients are not criminals, right? They're buying insurance, whether it's an annuity or whether it's life insurance. So let's talk about what's the risk to our clients and their advisors. So,
and to be clear, when you say policy expert, you're not referring to the insurance policy structure. You're referring to legislative policy. Yeah. So we're both members of a group called FinSECA. It's an organization, a nonprofit organization of financial security professionals from across the U.S. I think there's now 20 or 25,000, Frank. There's a bunch. Yeah.
And we all come together to say, look, we serve people and trying to provide financial security at all levels, whether that's helping mom with a term policy for her kids, or whether it's helping millionaires generate more money for charity. We're all serving our clients with financial security, and so we want to band together and try to make sure that our products are protected from a tax perspective because they provide real value. So that's what FinSec is.
All right. So it's a stay tuned on,
Yeah.
on the date for that.
We will send out an email when we have everything locked down. So if there's nothing more from you, Frank, I'll say, if you actually watched all of this, thanks. You probably tuned out by now, but anyway, thanks anyway. There's our contact information. Email us. We're great guys. And if you're in town, call us. We'll have a beer.
There you go.
All right.
All right,
Thanks, everybody.
perfect.